In the quiet pre-dawn hours outside the heavy climate-controlled vault doors of the royal archives, the carefully constructed empire of Queen Camilla suffered a catastrophic invisible collapse. What Camilla just realized, awakened by a frantic, deeply humiliating phone call from her own son, Tom Parker Bowles, is that her family's unrestricted access to the hidden treasures of the British monarchy has been permanently and brutally severed. Tom had arrived at the private estate expecting to quietly execute the transfer of highly valuable royal artifacts, only to find the electronic security codes completely wiped, his digital access pass deactivated, and armed metropolitan police officers blocking the corridor. In less than 60 seconds, the Parker Bowles family was forcefully reminded that they are merely temporary tourists in a kingdom they do not own. This is the story of a high-stakes institutional purge executed not with shouting matches or public scandals, but through the ruthless weaponization of administrative protocol and overnight security audits. By the end of this video, you will understand the secret. Staggering exploitation. Camilla attempted to orchestrate regarding the late Queen Elizabeth II's personal possessions, how Prince William intercepted the curatorial paper trail, and the chillingly quiet midnight retaliation that left the Queen Consort structurally isolated. You will see exactly how the illusion of absolute power shatters when confronted with the unyielding reality of bloodline authority. To comprehend the sheer magnitude of this psychological defeat, we must first examine the towering fortress of influence Camilla had spent 3 decades meticulously constructing. For 30 years, her trajectory within the House of Windsor was a masterclass in patient, calculated survival. She successfully navigated the wreckage of the 90s, weathered the enduring public adoration for Princess Diana, and slowly managed to rewrite her own narrative from the most criticized woman in Britain to the anointed Queen Consort. But her ambition did not stop at securing a title for herself. Her ultimate, long-term strategy relied on the gradual erasure of the past and the systematic elevation of her non-royal children into the permanent fabric of the monarchy. When King Charles ascended the throne, Camilla operated under the comfortable delusion that wearing the crown and sleeping in the palace granted her absolute equity in the institution. She treated her proximity to the sovereign as a shield of absolute permanence, assuming that as long as Charles held the scepter, her authority to mold the monarchy's inner circle was untouchable. This sense of supreme dominance bred a dangerous level of confidence. She began to visibly push Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes into the royal spotlight, granting them premium seating at the coronation, inviting them to state functions, and treating the sprawling royal estates as if they were her own private family inheritance. The catalyst for the ultimate reckoning emerged during a quiet administrative transition regarding the Royal Collection Trust. The Trust is the immense, fiercely protected institutional body that manages the art antiquities and historical artifacts of the British monarchy. Following the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, millions of deeply personal items, ranging from private correspondence to uncatalogued historical jewelry and intimate family gifts, were moved into the highly secure vaults for long-term archiving. For the true heirs to the throne, these items represent the sacred, untouchable legacy of a record-breaking reign. But for Camilla's faction, they represented an untapped reservoir of unimaginable commercial and social capital. Recognizing that King Charles was increasingly focused on his own health and the broader matters of state, Camilla quietly initiated a staggering institutional overreach. Under the guise of historical preservation and curatorial modernization, her office submitted a formal administrative request to the archives. The plan was brilliantly bureaucratic and deeply ambitious. Camilla sought to legally transfer the stewardship of a vast collection of Queen Elizabeth's deeply personal artifacts into a newly formed private heritage trust. The terrifying detail, however, was that this new trust was to be heavily managed and directed by her son, Tom Parker Bowles. It was a stealth maneuver designed to effectively commercialize the true royal legacy. By placing Tom in control of these artifacts, Camilla was attempting to grant her non-royal bloodline permanent institutional leverage. Her son would possess the authority to dictate where the late queen's items were exhibited, which biographers were granted access to her private letters, and how the visual memory of Elizabeth II would be packaged for the public. It was a calculated attempt to merge her personal ecosystem with the thousand-year-old heritage of the crown, silently elevating the Parker Bowles name to the level of the Windsors. She assumed the paperwork would slide through the distracted bureaucracy unnoticed. However, Camilla drastically underestimated the forensic vigilance of the modern Prince of Wales. Prince William does not govern through emotion or public complaint. He governs through the precise, unforgiving machinery of estate management and constitutional law. His silent, enduring grief for his mother and his profound respect for his late grandmother have forged him into a fierce, uncompromising protector of the crown's true legacy. He understands that the survival of the monarchy relies on absolute bloodline supremacy, and he monitors the administrative ecosystem of the royal collections with unyielding discipline. The discovery of this administrative trap happened during a routine, highly classified briefing on the Royal Collection Trust's internal curatorial transfers. As the ultimate controller of the Duchy of Cornwall and a senior stakeholder in the preservation of the Crown's historical assets, William regularly reviews the archival ledgers. When he and his top advisors examine the access requests and the legal frameworks originating from the Queen Consort's office, the true nature of the strategy became instantly clear. William recognized that this was not an innocent update to the historical archives. It was a direct, calculated assault on the memory of the late sovereign and a breathtaking attempt at commercial desperation by a family that fundamentally owns nothing. For William, the threat to the integrity of his grandmother's legacy was deeply personal, but his institutional response would be entirely professional, cold, and devastatingly precise. He did not storm into Clarence House, nor did he demand a dramatic confrontation with his father that would inevitably leak to the tabloid press. He understood that in the world of high-stakes, royal diplomacy, the most brutal blows are delivered through protocol digital access and quiet isolation. Utilizing his unyielding authority, William set a silent counter-strategy into motion. He bypassed the Queen Consort's office entirely and went directly to the highest echelons of the royal security apparatus and the directors of the royal collection. He recognized that the only way to defeat a bureaucratic attack was to weaponize the system itself, using the rigid parameters of state-funded security to construct an invisible wall around the artifacts. William legally authorized an unprecedented, immediate security mandate that completely revoked all non-working royal clearance to the deep storage vaults across all estates, including Highgrove and Windsor. The retaliation was executed through the quiet, invisible realm of digital access. Without notifying Camilla's private office, the master security database at the Royal Archives was subjected to a total zero-trust security reset. The protocol dictated that any individual lacking a direct constitutional role or explicit written authorization from the Prince of Wales would have their access instantly terminated. William transformed a routine administrative security patch into a lethal mechanism of institutional defense, ensuring that Camilla's illusion of absolute power would violently collide with the hard parameters of reality. The trap snapped shut with devastating precision in the dead of night. Operating under the assumption that the transfer paperwork had been approved, Tom Parker Bowles and a small team of private handlers arrived at the designated estate archives to begin cataloging and moving the artifacts. They approached the heavy vault doors with the absolute confidence of a family that believed the crown protected them. But as Tom swiped his highly privileged security card against the digital reader, the system flashed red. He tried the manual keypad, but the access codes he had used just days prior had been entirely wiped from the mainframe. In a scene of staggering quiet humiliation, a senior officer from the Metropolitan Police stepped out from the shadows. In a voice dripping with polite aristocratic finality, the officer informed the Queen Consort's son that his security clearance had been administratively revoked by the direct office of the Prince of Wales. He was told that he had no legal authorization to be on the premises, let alone to access the personal property of the late sovereign. The officer did not ask him to step back. He instructed him to immediately vacate the sovereign estate. Standing in the cold, dimly lit corridor, holding a deactivated plastic card, the realization hit Tom Parker Bowles and subsequently his mother with the force of a physical blow. The midnight lockout was not a technical glitch. It was forensic proof of a massive shifting of power. Camilla had reached for the ultimate sacred treasures of the British monarchy to elevate her son, only to discover that the core institution had entirely insulated itself against her. As Tom retreated to his vehicle and dialed his mother's private number, the heavy vault doors remained firmly sealed, locking the Queen Consort and her family out of the empire forever. The jarring ring of the secure telephone in Queen Camilla's private quarters shattered the quiet of the early morning. Listening to her son's panicked, humiliated voice, describing the flashing red lights and the armed police officers at the archive doors, Camilla realized that her master plan had not just failed, it had been forensically dismantled. She had attempted to use the boring, invisible machinery of curatorial administration to hand her family the keys to the kingdom. Instead, she was holding the terrifying proof that her own bloodline had been permanently locked out of the royal heritage. Masking her shock beneath a veneer of aristocratic composure, she waited for the sun to rise before turning to the one person who had spent 30 years legitimizing her ambition. She walked into King Charles's private study, demanding an immediate intervention. Camilla presented her son's eviction from the vaults as a direct insult to the crown itself. She demanded that Charles immediately overrule the Prince of Wales' restore Tom Parker Bowles' digital clearance and forcefully authorize the transfer of the late Queen's artifacts into her newly formed private trust. She desperately needed her husband to prove that her position as Queen Consort meant she held equal equity in the historical assets of the kingdom, and that her family could not simply be erased by the heir to the throne. She waited for him to summon the directors of the Royal Collection Trust and forcefully re-establish her shadow court's access to the vaults. But what she received instead was the ultimate psychological betrayal. As Camilla finished her demand, King Charles simply looked away, offering a heavy, devastating silence. The king, navigating the profound vulnerabilities of his own health and acutely aware of the fragile architecture of his reign, did absolutely nothing. He did not reach for the telephone. He did not challenge his son's administrative security patch. Charles is a pragmatist who understands the unyielding cold physics of the crown better than anyone. He knows that his reign relies on the smooth, unbroken continuity of the bloodline. To overturn a legally sound, highly secure archive protocol in order to allow his stepson to commercialize Queen Elizabeth II's personal, intimate artifacts would not just provoke an internal constitutional crisis, it would spark an unprecedented public relations nightmare. Engaging in a factional war against his own heir to indulge his wife's commercial desperation was a battle the current sovereign knew he would instantly lose. Charles made the cold, calculated decision to look away. He chose the quiet survival of the institution's dignity over the immediate comfort of his wife. For Camilla, realizing that her absolute protector would abandon her son to the bureaucratic machinery of the palace was a psychological death blow. This chilling silence from the king exposed the terrifying reality of what royal insiders describe as the staggering commercial desperation of the Parker Bowles family. It is incredibly easy to be blinded by the majesty of the royal standard, the sweeping velvet robes and the glittering tiaras on display at state banquets. The public sees the Queen Consort and her family standing on balconies and assumes they sit atop an empire of unimaginable wealth and permanent privilege. But the forensic financial truth is staggering. Queen Camilla and her children actually own virtually nothing of the royal empire they so desperately seek to control. The true economic engine of the monarchy, the billion-dollar Duchy of Cornwall, belongs entirely and absolutely to Prince William. The priceless historical artifacts, the ancient castles, and the vast royal collection are held in trust by the sovereign for the nation, and their administration is increasingly influenced by the heir to the throne. When Camilla attempted to alter the archival security parameters to secure a private heritage trust for Tom, she forgot that she was playing with assets she does not and will never own. She is in the coldest legal terms, a highly titled guest residing in properties managed by a system that ultimately answers to the bloodline. By permanently revoking Tom Parker Bowles's access to the deep storage vaults, William sent a clear, untraceable administrative message. He reminded Camilla that every historical document her family touches, every vault door they approach, and every artifact they attempt to leverage exists solely at the administrative discretion of the true heirs. If Camilla attempted to push back or leak the story, William possessed the absolute authority to subject her entire private staff to the exact same humiliating security audits, ensuring that not a single piece of Windsor history would ever leave the heavily guarded perimeter. Without the king's unilateral signature to protect her, Camilla's bureaucratic empire collapsed overnight. While William systematically dismantled the administrative scaffolding of Camilla's strategy, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, executed the emotional and visual checkmate. Catherine's immense power has always been her uncomplaining sacrifice and her flawless understanding of visual symbolism. She did not need to issue a public statement regarding the midnight lockout at the archives, nor did she need to engage in a territorial dispute over curatorial rights. She simply allowed the new protocol to manifest visually, bringing the unmistakable moral authority of the true royal family to the forefront of the global stage. The visual execution of this new order occurred just weeks later during a highly publicized state banquet at Buckingham Palace. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension as the royal family gathered to greet foreign dignitaries. When Catherine stepped into the brilliant light of the ballroom, the room went completely still. Fastened to her gown was a breathtaking, diamond-encrusted brooch that had belonged personally to Queen Elizabeth II. That detail matters immensely. The brooch was not a standard ceremonial piece. It was a deeply intimate family heirloom, and more importantly, it was one of the exact highly valuable artifacts that had been listed on Tom Parker Bowles's rejected transfer manifest. By wearing the brooch, Catherine was not just honoring the late sovereign. She was dropping a psychological nuclear bomb on Camilla's 30-year legacy plan. It was a forensic visual broadcast to the entire palace staff, the security forces, and the global public about who actually controls the heritage of the Windsor dynasty. The contrast was breathtakingly brutal. While the son of the Queen Consort was locked out in the cold, staring at deactivated security badges, the Princess of Wales was physically draped in the sacred history of the kingdom. Camilla was forced to stand mere feet away, greeting guests, while fully realizing that Catherine had effortlessly claimed the exact treasures her own family had tried to seize. It was a total institutional erasure of Camilla's long-term commercial strategy, executed without a single word being spoken out of turn. The message was unmistakable: the line of dignity sacrifice. And true royal legitimacy skips completely over the Camilla era, linking Queen Elizabeth directly to Catherine. Furthermore, this silent perimeter around the royal collection is being strictly respected and enforced by the old guard of the palace, most notably by Princess Anne. As the ultimate keeper of royal discipline, Anne has fully aligned with William's strict adherence to archival protocol. Anne recognizes that William is utilizing the boring mechanics of estate security to protect the crown's future, ensuring that the legacy of her mother is not plundered from modern public relations capital. The unified front between the Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal guarantees that Camilla's non-royal family members will remain permanently locked out of the core monarchy. The ultimate tragedy for Camilla is that she spent her entire life playing a highly sophisticated game of personal strategy. She manipulated the narrative, weathered decades of public outrage, and maneuvered through scandals to place a crown upon her own head. She believed that winning the heart of the king was enough to secure her family's absolute supremacy. But she failed to realize that the House of Windsor survives not by indulgence, but by ruthlessly cutting away anything that threatens its permanent stability. She discovered too late that true power does not come from proximity to the throne. It comes from controlling the complex machinery of the institution. Camilla reached for the ultimate treasures of state power to elevate her son, only to discover that the final, winning move belonged to the grandson of the woman she had tried to exploit. She is now trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, surrounded by the undeniable evidence that the moment the current reign ends, her illusion of power will vanish into the administrative archives forever. When the final transition of the crown inevitably occurs, the world will not see a dramatic confrontation. They will simply see a family stripped of their borrowed access, quietly guided through a side door, driving away toward an isolated retirement while William and Catherine stand firmly as the sole custodians of the crown. What do you think about Prince William's brilliant use of midnight security audits to protect his grandmother's legacy? Do you believe the Parker Bowles family went too far in trying to commercialize the royal archives? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming forensic deep dives into the hidden mechanics of the British monarchy.